We're live.
Welcome back to Everything EOS, the longest running EOS podcast. Man, shortly before this podcast, my Oculus Quest just came in. I finally got one, and I've been in Beat Saber for the last like 2 hours. So yeah, I still kind of feel like I'm there a little bit, but I'm adjusting. I'm back in reality. So I'm excited for this podcast. Are you live, Zach? Are you there? Are you live?
This is the last time we'll be using Zoom, Rob. Everyone watching. So we're gonna have to
link error.
Yep, we got the link error again. Zoom is the worst at this, so let's wait for the traffic to move over. We'll be all right though.
Yeah, that's good. I thought I was still in the VR world and it looked like you had frozen. I was looking at your screen and you're just sitting there staring. So I didn't know what was going on, but I'm glad you're here. We didn't disconnect. It's all good. Let's keep the show rolling for the replay folks as well.
All right. This is annoying, man. I'm not happy with Zoom. Okay, we got 19 over here. Let's go. So you just came out of VR. What was that headset called you were talking about before you?
So it's the Oculus Quest. It's a new one where you don't have to like hook it up to computers or anything. And the most bizarre part was when you first put it on, it has these cameras all over it. And I didn't know it was going to do this, but it basically scans your entire real environment and puts it there as if you have like a digital copy of it. So like I saw my cats running around in this like digital virtual world, and then you like draw a line around the space you want to play, and the walls in your house like move away, and then the virtual world comes in. It was really crazy, but a lot of fun. It seems like that's sort of where a lot of things are headed.
So did you see recently High Fidelity, they moved to almost all virtual offices, or like a high percentage virtual offices?
Yeah, they're pivoting from like gaming, I guess, over to the corporate world, it seems like.
So that was kind of interesting to me. So I forget why I was looking it up, but I was looking up like virtual offices and VR and stuff just to see like what everyone else is doing, because obviously High Fidelity is a VR company. You kind of expect them to kind of be trailblazers on stuff like this. But I was reading about this guy. He's in the finance industry, and he was talking about how he was able to work so much more efficiently in this VR world. And the way he described it was like 360 degrees of like curved monitors, like over 100 monitors, with each monitor having like different like tickers and different charts and stuff. And basically he was able to like manipulate the screens with his hands, just like you're in VR.
Wow.
And like, it's something like out of this world, because to have something like that would be, one, very expensive, and two, require a ton of hardware. And he said basically he had an assistant working with him that they were able to just like communicate all of this information and make like real-time decisions. But he said the biggest limiting factor is the headsets, and he couldn't see himself wearing it for an entire work day because it's just like uncomfortable. So
that makes sense.
It was super cool. And the other limitation, I guess. So tell me about the like hand sticks whenever you're in there, and like how that works.
It's pretty wild. I mean, so there are these two different hand controllers that are wireless, and I guess the headset somehow tracks it with the cameras or Bluetooth or some other technology. But at a certain point in some games, it dissolves the hand controller, so then it's just your hands. And based on how you're holding them, it knows if you're doing a fist or pointing or have your hands off like this, and you can sort of like feel like you're picking stuff up and throwing it, and it has this like light haptic response. But definitely, if you need to like pick something up in the real world or something, it's a weird experience to drop the controllers and have them hanging from your wrists. But as long as you need to hold them, it's great.
So how long have you been into VR? Like, how many generations of equipment have you been through? Because it has to be getting better, right?
Oh, it's getting so much better. I mean, since the very first, the first one I ever got was the original Oculus Rift before they got bought by Facebook. And it was actually the developer kit version. So it was like Gen 1. This is the first hardware they released. And I was in there playing this horror game that was still terrifying, even though the tech wasn't nearly as good as it is today. But the screen's getting better. The latency is getting better. And now you can kind of use it in your whole house, which is pretty neat.
I was at a hi-fi meetup in Pittsburgh a couple of months ago, and they were talking about how there was something coming out, it might even already be out, that's just like a standalone system. So you don't even have to have a computer for it to work. And it had like a really low price point, like maybe $200-$300. That's really going to open up a lot of doors. But this wasn't even our notes. So I think we got to get into our podcast mode here. This is our first
Let's do it.
podcast where we're covering regular news on the live stream. So we'll see how this one goes. But first, as a reminder, everyone's got to smash the likes. We had to switch over to this new landing page. I'm sorry about that. We want to make sure the YouTube algo sees us and make sure everyone else can find us. But there's been a shakeup in the top 21, and this isn't something super recently, but it's getting more and more attention. Coincidentally, EOS New York posted a tweet yesterday how they like never missed a block since the mainnet launch, and within 24 hours they were bumped out of the top 21 temporarily for the first time ever. So, what do you think's going on there with all the voting?
Yeah, I mean, I've had a lot of people ask me this, and I've responded to some tweets here and there. I mean, ultimately, from a very high level, governance is working, and that those with the most tokens have the most power on the network. But what I really think the issue is here, the reason why people in the West particularly don't think it's going very well. And you can imagine if the tables were turned and the 1 through 21 was all VPs from America and Canada and South America and all these places, we'd be like, oh, things are great, things are fine. But the reason why I think we're not seeing a lot of representation here in the West is just because there's very, very low voter participation. Only something like 20% of all tokens on the network are being voted right now. So once that number comes up and more people are voting, other institutions like Coinbase and Chains and all these exchanges, once they start to participate in governance, I think it'll represent that in the actual diversity of block producers.
So I want to share something on the screen here. I think Zane Oro from EOS Radio shared this in our channel earlier.
Yeah, okay.
So, whoops, that's not the right screen. All right. So it's basically showing the top 100, it's not showing the top 100 token holders, it's the top 12, but it's just showing that the biggest accounts aren't voting. So we often talk about Block.one voting, and we'll get into that in a little bit because Dan gave some interesting insight on that. But you said as a block producer, part of your job is to kind of educate financial institutions like hedge funds and VC funds and let them know why they should invest in EOS. And then if they do invest, obviously you want them to stake their tokens and vote. So what have been the biggest, I guess, reasons for them not voting that they've shared with you? Because it's a pretty obvious one.
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest thing right now has been that lack of liquidity, really. Like a lot of these funds don't want to lock up their tokens, even though it's only 3 days, or in the case of Rex, you could lock it up for 4 on the front end and then get 1%. Even though it's only a couple of days of losing liquidity, a lot of these funds are very, very hesitant to stake any of their EOS, even though it would be more secure. They just want that liquidity. So if they need to, they can pull out at a moment's notice.
So I knew what you were going to say there because we planned this ahead of time. But
giving away the secrets.
When we were in our car ride to EE31 May, I told you about this little trick with the staking to Rex that I thought of all people in the EOS ecosystem, the man himself that knows everything about EOS, Rob Finch, would have known this.
I did,
So whenever you stake your tokens to the Rex for the first time from Liquid EOS into Rex EOS or whatever the Rex token, whatever that unit of account's called, there's a 4-day waiting period. I'm not sure of the actual cooldown time. I'm not sure what they call it. But whenever you have to vote for 21 or more block producers, and then you stake it into Rex, and then you can't withdraw those tokens for 4 days. And when you do that, there is 2 options. There's the regular option, and that's the default on a site like blocks.io. But then there's also a savings option, which I've never used because it wasn't a requirement. And the savings.io basically adds the 3-day time delay that we're all used to.
Right.
Before the Rex, when I would vote, I would stake my tokens. They'd have a 3-day staking period. And then if I wanted to unstake them, they'd have a 3-day unstaking period. And it would be gradual, like they would unstake a little bit at a time. But with Rex, and I'm giving this message so that everyone could talk to exchanges, hedge funds, anyone with a lot of tokens who isn't voting because they require that liquidity. When you're staked to Rex, you're allowed to vote for block producers. At least 21 is the minimum requirement. If you don't stake using the savings option, whenever you unstake from after your 4-day cooling period, let's say 2 weeks have gone by, you could unstake all of your Rex tokens with immediate liquidity.
Oh, wow. Yeah, and then you don't have to wait that 3 days, right?
So I'm just looking in the chat. So let's know in the chat if anyone knew about that, especially Saeed, because you built the Blocks Rex tool, and I'm surprised nobody's talked about this. Using the Rex and not using the optional savings feature, you could vote with your tokens and have immediate liquidity after your first 4-day your staking period is over. So once you're staked to Rex, you have immediate liquidity. And I just kind of want to get that message out because I haven't seen anyone talking about it.
Yeah, I think it's cool. And I think a lot of this will also change as well as these institutions, they hold more EOS and they realize, oh, staking is actually a security feature. I noticed on the Coinbase custody page, and they just announced that they'll be accepting EOS.
yeah.
So if you're an institution, you can custody it there. But they have a governance module that says coming soon. So ostensibly, they're going to allow people, these big institutions who hold a lot of EOS there, to actually vote for block producers while keeping their tokens offline and secure. So I'm looking forward to that from Coinbase as well.
I want to start seeing some exchanges voting more. And I'm not saying like all of their tokens by any means, but they have to know what like the most percentage of withdrawals they've ever had in a day before. And then they could maybe stake even below that. But with the method I just explained, I don't see an excuse anymore for bigger accounts to not vote because of a lack of liquidity. And
yeah, well, speaking of bigger accounts, I mean, the biggest account that everybody's been looking at to vote is B1, Block.one. And there are a lot of problems with them just coming out and voting solely on their own right now. It would be, you know, massive centralization that they could basically pick who the top 21 are. And I don't think that's something that we want. But Dan had a really interesting comment in Telegram. Somebody asked him this question. It's an idea for this, you know, for B1 voting their tokens on behalf of voice users. He said, would Dan and the B1 team ever consider voting B1's token based on input from the community? Each unique voice user could pick their favorite BPs, and B1 would vote their tokens based on this ongoing input from all unique and active members of the EOS community. And Dan said, already had that thought, it's under consideration. So that is super exciting and really goes to show that they are trying to be an active participant in the governance model of EOS, but they're being very cautious about it in a good way, in that they don't want to just come out and vote all on their own, because then it'll be centralized. So I like this. And I think this could be cool if you had, you know, 1 million or even 10 million people on voice all choosing who B1 voted for. I think that would be an incredibly decentralized way to do it.
John Heater from Boyd, he just made a comment in the live chat, and with the stuff with Rex, you do give up some security. Like whenever you have Liquid EOS pulling out of Rex, like you do give up security, because that time delay is a security feature. So I guess if you're going to do that, you would want some strong multi-sig components to it, I guess would be the workaround for that. But thanks for bringing that up, John.
If you're going to keep your EOS in Rex, you might as well put it in savings if it's going to be there for a long time, just so that you don't have to worry about, you know, somebody getting a hold of it.
So that quote you read about Dan, that's big. So I'll pull up another tweet that he mentioned. I'm just going to pull this one up, and you could read it for everyone again. Then we'll get into discussing what we think this means.
Yeah, so Dan tweeted out, unique identity enables a truly democratic blockchain governance as well as hybrid. Voice is the best chance for blockchains looking to decentralize their governance from Pareto power distribution, which is this model where generally the top few accounts make the most money, the top few BPs make the most money. If adopted, it would make EOS even more decentralized than all others, which is pretty cool. I think that goes along the same lines.
So there's two things going on here. One, in this tweet that's up on the screen, it's a dual governance model where right now, all votes are stake weighted. That's the only type of voting we have is stake weighting voting. But what he is suggesting here is maybe in the future we could have a dual type of vote where stake weight carries something and then unique votes carries another thing. I doubt the mainnet will be the first chain to implement that, but I think we will see something like that on a sister chain or a side chain in the future. But going back to that first message, I'm going to pull that one back up on the screen, because I really like this idea, because we've constantly talked about Block.one voting and how they would determine their votes, because they can't really show favoritism. So what this would allow is they could programmatically vote in an objective way based on they're going to have the geography of these unique voters. And then they also have the data that's on chain of the geography of the producing BPs in the top 21. So using some sort of algorithm, they could factor in the unique votes from different jurisdictions and possibly use their voting power on the mainnet. What do you think about that? And what would how would you hypothesize that they would actually do that using the tools that we know that they're going to have in the next couple of months, definitely before the end of this year?
Right. So it's really interesting, because right now Block.one has, I believe it's 90 million staked EOS in the account B1, which you can search on any block explorer like blocks.io and actually see their account and their transactions. But if they wanted to vote, they would have to vote all 96 million. Like there's no way, at least as far as I know, for them to actually split that up, because those tokens are still locked. They can't transfer it out to a new account. and then vote from there. So they would be voting all 96 million. So I would be interesting to see, like, at what threshold do they actually cast a vote? Do they need 1 million unique users voting for BPs and then they vote it all? Do they need 10 million, 20 million? Or will it be like one user for every one token that Block.one holds if they really are thinking big and think that they can onboard a couple 100 million users? I don't know, but I think it would be good. The more people that we can have participating, especially other exchanges, like in that top 12 list, there are people like Binance, BitHum, all these different people that haven't voted yet that could really help to lessen the power that whales on EOS have right now, just because so few tokens are being voted.
Yeah, I don't, even though he made those suggestions, I think he was being more theoretical. I honestly don't think we're going to see Block.one voting this year. I think that there's a lot more important things for them to do, as much as we want them to vote.
Agree.
And as far as geographic diversity, I mean, it's stake weighted vote. I mean, we knew what we were signing up for. And if the top 21 nodes aren't geographically diverse, then maybe people in other parts of the world need more tokens to vote with.
Right.
Like we're playing by the rules we set.
Absolutely. And I've had a lot of people ask me, like, why aren't you concerned about this? And the reason why is because there hasn't been some kind of a centralization event, I guess I could call it. So if, for example, the same group of people put in their own 15 out of the top 21 BPs and then try to make a change in the system because they have 15 out of 21, they could change a lot of different variables and things like that. They could, push updates to the chain for good or for bad. So as long as there isn't an event like that where they try to update or change the chain in some way, which I really do not think they will do, because again, they have the most tokens, they have the most to lose in the event that they go out and destroy the legitimacy of the chain in that way. So I'm not really concerned about it until there is some kind of an event. And again, I really think the probability of an event like that, some kind of centralization control event, is very, very, very small. I really don't think it's going to happen.
I think one of the biggest reasons people are upset is because we live in the West. We all speak English, and the block producers we know the closest and the best are people like you, people like EOS New York, EOS Nation, EOS Canada, Greymass. I can name a lot of them. And these are the ones that we've gotten to know over the last year, and we've built this relationship with them, and we want to support them financially via our vote.
Right.
And because the WPS was pulled a long time ago, like there's no other way to support your favorite champions of the network. And I think that's where a lot of the discontent comes from. But one of the things that I'm hoping for is a couple of months ago, someone asked Brendan about the WPS and if it would ever be possible on the mainnet. And he said it's a second layer, that he supports it, just not on the base layer. Mm-hmm. So now that we're going to have voice with unique identity, once you solve unique identity, you remove a lot of attack vectors. You remove cyber attacks. You have this new governance mechanism that can be used to hold people accountable. Because like Dan said in our podcast, whenever I mentioned, I think we were talking about closed source code, and how if you have to attach your unique identity to that code, if you're going to screw people over and steal all their money, you're only going to be able to do it once, because you only get one reputation. And then even if you do steal everyone's money with unique identity associated with you, I don't know if there'd be restrictions on the contracts with transactions to and from voice identity verified accounts. But who are you going to send your tokens to if you're only able to send them to other voice accounts? Right?
Yeah, I mean, I hope that we don't have any restrictions like that. I really don't think that's what they're going for. Like, there should still be a way to go out of the voice identity system to some other account. Maybe you go through POS or something, and then go through there. And speaking, actually, there's one quick thing I do need to mention about POS. Chaints.com, which is an exchange, they were one of the first exchanges that came out. It's an EOS-only exchange, has not enabled POS deposits and withdrawals, or I think only withdrawals, actually, which is part of the messed up part. For the last several weeks now. I think we're coming up on over a month. So this is just a message to anybody that works at Chaints. If you want to come on the show, let people know what is going on. We simply want an answer. Tons and tons of users have reached out saying, hey, why can't I withdraw my POS from Chaints? That's the only token affected. We really just want communication. So that's a message from the community there as well. A lot of people just want answers. So Chaints, any people from your team are welcome to come on the show.
So that's great. But yeah, I'm trying to think. You kind of threw me off there. It's a little off topic.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to throw you off, but I think we need to be able to go outside of that voice identity ecosystem. Maybe then you go through POS and now you have another private account, or you just keep your account separate in that way. But I think if you go too far down the road of like, oh, your unique account can't do this and yours can do this, we get into a very 1984 situation where like social credit scores come into play, like it's happening in China, where your freedoms get limited. And that's the last thing I want to have happen with any of this technology.
The way I look at voice, so before the mainnet launched, even the first couple months, whenever ECAF was still around, like we talked about arbitration. So the way I look at voice and voice accounts, even though they're regular EOS accounts from everything we've been told, I see using your voice ID account as opting in to Block.one as your arbitrator. It's almost like an arbitration agreement. So you're agreeing to specific terms that they're being transparent about. And one of them is that you have to verify that you're a unique individual and that you're human. So that's something that they've already stated. But then the other thing could be maybe, like you said, it shouldn't be a walled garden. Your token shouldn't be stuck in there, but maybe there would be a time delay. So that's a natural feature of EOSIO is if you have any token in a voice account, maybe there would be a specific time delay to send it out of your voice account and into a regular EOS account. Because then if there was theft, one, you know who the identity is of the person who stole everything, who's trying to transfer it out of voice. And then the other thing is that they're, as part of the arbitration agreement, those funds could be saved. So that's kind of how I see it, is it's like an arbitration agreement. Because I did see, I don't know if it's Dan or Brendan, but they said they have account recovery features built in that Block.one will help you with, but only for voice accounts, not all EOS mainnet accounts.
Interesting. Well, and I have a feeling it's going to be something that might not even be linked to your government ID. Once we know that your government ID will be required as at least for the, version 1 of the sign up process. But maybe, like we had been speculating way before when we thought June was just going to be some kind of a wallet announcement. This was like at the beginning of the year. Maybe you will be able to recover your account with your face or with your fingerprint using Touch ID or Face ID or one of these other technologies that are already built into your phone. I mean, that is like, that would be very, very next level. Maybe you need to do Face ID and your recovery partner needs to do it as well. But there's a lot of potential with this voice identity layer that I'm very, very excited about.
From I forget, I lost my thought. Oh well. So
one thing
we got an email today.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
Everyone signed up for the voice beta at the B1 June event, and every minute of the day thereafter, and everyone was like, I didn't get a confirmation email.
Where's my email?
We finally got a confirmation email, and it has no extra information. It just says that they got your email and things are coming. Stay tuned. So if anyone's been looking for it, check your email. It's probably in your promotions folder.
Yeah, and this was pretty interesting as well. We've heard about the ad budget that we'll talk about in a little bit, which is pretty mind-blowing and shows just how many users they're going to try to onboard onto voice.com. But we also learned that Block.one has a $150 million budget to build out and sustain voice and add new features and all these things. And this originally came out from the block, and it sort of implied that they had already spent $150 million. But we quickly learned from Dan, somebody said, voice took $150 million to build. And he said, no, that's a pre-committed budget. So they've put up to $150 million to build this thing out, to do what they want to do with it, which is pretty awesome. I mean, that is an insane runway that I don't think any other crypto project has. And that's only one project from Block.one. So it's pretty amazing.
I was just happy to see the block not just dragging EOS name through the mud. But at the end of the day, the blockcrypto.com, they're great journalists. I think it's just Mike Dudas that's a turd. I don't know.
I think so.
I don't think it's not
the block even came out on behalf of the block as a whole and said, what Mike published that one time was like not okay. We sort of rescind those comments. So generally the articles I read on there are relatively non-biased. So
I really like their work. So I'm gonna pull up the Dan messages. So I guess the preview, I'll show that the Block.one pours $150 million into its new social media platform. Someone asked about it on Telegram. So someone asked, Voice took $150 million US to build. Dan just said, no, that's just a pre-committed budget. But he did clarify. He said, they are spending big and it's not going to be your typical project. And then I'm going to scroll down a little bit. And this is a repeat for anyone who watched some of our last live stream. But the topic of influencers came out. And Brendan said, of course, social media is controlled by influencers, and they like influencers do make good money. You look at like Kim Kardashian, people like that, they can promote any product they want and their following will go buy it. But what voice allows is it's more transparent. So that you don't have like just this bot army that's making your accounts go viral. every once in a while, like Twitter, or Facebook, or Instagram, they'll go on a purge, and then you'll see certain like celebrities. Like I remember Justin Bieber lost like millions of followers on Instagram one time because they're all bots. But the thing that stood out, I'm kind of rambling here, is we're going to repeat that Brendan Bloomer said we have an ad budget in the hundreds of millions of dollars and structured plan to onboard influencers, and that's outside of the value emitted from the tokens. And then he goes on, and this was a couple days later, I think. Think of it this way. If someone with 100 million followers switched over to voice and 50 million of those users follow, we expect they could make $50 to $100 million just for switching. Wait. That's more than the net worth of many of those influencers themselves.
Is he saying they can make $50 to $100 million?
I mean, it doesn't have the dollar sign, but like, how else do you read this? How are you interpreting it?
Okay, we expect they can make 50. I think that might be $50 to $100 million. I mean, if that's true, if that's actually true that Taylor Swift and Kim Kardashian and all these major people, Kanye West, anybody could, and President Trump even could switch over. If they brought 50 million of their own followers, if they could make $50 million, every single influencer is going to switch, whether they have 100,000 followers, a million, 10 million. Like, that's insane. I mean, if that's actually real, this is going to be massive.
So he's, and then I'll just finish the quote so I can pull it off the screen. Trust me, we're thinking deeply on the same level you are, and are saving our marketing for when we're ready to bring them on. So they're waiting to get their onboarding process ready. But with this, what this sounds like to me is that they'll have a referral program. That is nothing new. Almost every company with a product has a referral like system.
Right.
And they're a multi-billion-dollar company. They have smart people working on it. And whenever you're coming up with a business plan or a revenue plan, you make projections. What is the value of a customer worth in their lifetime as being a customer? And then you have to make it so that the cost to acquire that customer is lower than the average lifetime revenue that you will make from that customer, right?
Right.
So what this tells me is they're valuing a customer at $1 to $2 per follower.
I mean, can you imagine if there was some tool where you give an influencer and you say, hey, tweet this post out, it'll auto tweet every day. And for every one of your followers that clicks the links and sign up for voice, you make $1. I mean, the people with a ton of followers are going to make a ton of money. Like that's just crazy.
I mean, we're seeing a shift in social media already. So like from Instagram, you can click a product and it takes you directly to the product page of the e-commerce site, and then that Instagrammer is somehow getting credited for that referral. So these systems are already getting baked into the current like centralized social medias that we're already using today. And like we know Facebook's trying to get into blockchain, and they're trying to do payments. So Block.one's just thinking ahead. They're trying to play 3D chess here. And like if they could bring these influencers over, like people want to, the reason most competitors to the major players in social media have failed up to this point is because people will only use a social media platform that their friends are on. If your friends aren't on that platform, the people you want to follow aren't on that platform, then you have no reason to be there. And
the quickest way to jumpstart that is to say, oh, you have 50 million followers on Twitter. Why don't we give you $50 million for bringing those people over? And then the network effect will sort of make itself.
So to build on that, man, I keep forgetting these thoughts today. I guess we'll just have to continue on about the token economics. So it's interesting because how the voice token actually works. And now I remember what I wanted to say. So the hundreds of millions of dollars for influencers. Let me backtrack real quick. Where do you think those hundreds of millions of dollars will come from? Because we know that they have $2.2 billion in US bonds. And then we also know about, I forget the number of Bitcoins. What was it, like 120 some thousand? So if they're going to pay these influencers 140,000, we also know that all voice tokens none of them are pre-mined. Block.one doesn't have an allotment. They're all mined on a daily basis by unique individuals. So there's no like partnership supply that they're going to be giving these influencers.
I do think it's possible though that they have some kind of equation built into the inflation or something where maybe the referral program is a part of that. But I don't know. That remains to be seen. I just think that there maybe is a way that the voice token plays into that referral bonus of like, oh, you brought on 50 million of your followers. Here's $50 million worth of voice. But how that would work in the early days, to your point, like when they're giving out a set amount every day, maybe it is coming from actual EOS in their account or actual Bitcoin or even just US dollars that they have, since they got plenty of those.
I think the biggest thing right now is, and we know this is a fact, is regulation. So to pay anyone, even for a referral program, even though referral programs are something we see every day in typical like e-commerce today and business today, the fact that it's like tokenized creates all these regulational problems because it's like this legal gray area. So I think that might be an issue. And that's probably one of the issues they're working out right now before they're ready to start onboarding the masses.
Yeah, and I did like that Brendan did say that they're still optimistic that, you know, even though you'll be able to earn voice tokens in the US and they'll just be locked on your account, you can't get value out. He did say that they're optimistic that voice tokens in the US could still be transferable. So it seems like maybe they're in ongoing conversations with regulators, or in some other way, they sort of have their ear to the door and kind of know what's happening behind the scenes. So I'm optimistic now as well, seeing Brendan's optimism.
That's how I interpret it. I have to find something, Rob. So why don't you pull up the token economics on your screen while I look for something else on my screen?
Sure, let's do it.
All right. So you'll have to talk to the people, man. I can't talk and search at the same time.
Oh, no, you're good. Absolutely. I just got to pull up the screen. We were going to talk about Brave earlier, and then Brave actually crashed on me, but I do have Brave up again. So here it is. This is the voice token economics that Dan was explaining. And this was something that I think a lot of people hoped they would have heard at B1 June, but obviously it was a much higher level sort of conceptual event. So he said, I'm going to explain the game that voice gives users to play. So for example, you want to voice comments under posts which you think others will want to voice. If you're right, you make a 10% return, which is interesting because that gives us some insight into how much you'll make when somebody out voices your comment. If it's a 10% return, that actually looks pretty appealing. You might want to voice it multiple times in a bidding war. And as long as you're not last, you earn more voice. If you are last, though, you get more visibility. And then he goes on to say that increased visibility means you get more likes, and likes earn you money from inflation. And I thought it was cool in one of the screenshots that they had was that essentially it said it had like a breakdown of what somebody earned for the day. So it was like, oh, you got 160 voice total, 100 of that came from your daily allocation. And then you had 10 post likes, you get 10 tokens. So if that's how the actual breakdown will work, and for every like you get 1 token, you can probably earn a significant amount of tokens. But Dan goes on to say, you should probably post an amazing comment under a soon to be popular post and then voice it. In this way, you win the game and collect the most voice. After you voice it, you want to share a link so more people see it. And this is very cool, and also sort of plays into why Dan was such a big fan of Pixel Master that we talked about, I think, on the last podcast as well, where when you bought a Pixel, if somebody else bought it from you, you would get that, roughly 10% return or whatever it was in that game. But pretty interesting. What do you think of all this?
I think we had a pretty good handle on like what the token economics were before they made this stuff apparent. I wasn't listening completely. Did you read the line below it too when Tequila asked that question?
Oh, no, I didn't. So they said they're a bit stunned. This is part of the plan. And Brendan went on to sort of clarify there's no ad revenue because all forms of ads are planned to belong to token holders. Your hypothesis of such potential is exactly what voice is already planned to be. So that gives us some insight as well that there aren't going to be ad spots on voice, which is another big reason why users might want to use it. You're not getting bombarded with ads. Instead, it's on the token holders to sort of voice what they want to the top. So it's going to be interesting. And I think going to be a huge opportunity monetarily for influencers, not just for coming over, but also for engaging in some of this.
Mm-hmm. So with that, it basically means that there's no like dollars changing hands. Like there's no revenue share because the revenue, the value is in the token itself. If you're an advertiser, you have to buy tokens to get attention. The voice token is essentially the utility of the voice token is literally attention. So I was thinking like, what's the missing piece here? Because we know that they reeled back expectations for B1 June in the weeks leading up to it. And I kept thinking, if you're a big company, if you're like Microsoft or you're like Pepsi or Cola, and you need to buy a lot of voice tokens, where are you going to buy them from? And I was thinking of things we already have, like the resource exchange.
Right.
So I'm gonna pull up some messages, and I shared these in the public, the main channel, but I just wanted to bring them up in here real quick to pull up a few things. I was sharing like screenshots of things Dan said a while ago. And back in November, Dan said, we have people working on Rex, DEX, security, wallet, design, social, hard forks, faster database, all at the same time. Now, out of those, Rob, we've seen everything except one thing on there. And which one is it?
Right, the DEX. We talked about this on last episode as well, I think.
I don't think I showed the pictures.
So that's right.
In the office, we have a test social media and DEX contract, functional wallets. So he mentions the DEX again, and that was in November. And then lastly, when he's saying June is coming, he basically says DEX. The code for DEX will come out. So I don't know if Block.one's going to release code like we've seen them do with EOSIO Labs, or if they plan to deploy DEX themselves. And you might be right. I've been talking about this a lot. I may have mentioned on the last one. But I think that that's the missing piece that we're waiting for the regulation certainty on, is this DEX. Because I think one of the things that slowed it down was the case against Ether Delta.
Right.
Ether Delta, the owner of it, and this was a decentralized exchange on Ethereum, the court ruled that he was responsible for what his code did, even if he didn't deploy his code himself. I think he did deploy his code, but they said whenever he wrote the code that he knew what it was going to be used for, and therefore would be held accountable. So I think that's a bit of uncertainty.
Did it go to that extent? Because I remember a lot of people that were very upset about a potential ruling like that, saying that that has incredible implications for open source software, where if you release software out into the wild, you can't control what people do with it. And if somebody does something, you shouldn't be responsible for it.
Maybe that's why they settled. So I don't have the article in front of me. I'm just saying that this is probably the piece we're waiting on before we're ready to kind of bring the masses on, is because we have to have an easy way for big companies and big brands, or even individuals, to be able to buy and sell the tokens. Because if this is going to be more mainstream, there has to be a very frictionless way to create a marketplace for these tokens, because normal people aren't going to go on Nudex or some other site. Like, we'll be able to, and maybe we
right. But couldn't they just integrate with an existing provider like a Nudex or even like an EOS Finex? Because the Bitfinex owns part of Block.one. I don't know if they still do after the recent buybacks, but assuming that's the case, I would think it would make way more sense to integrate with somebody like an EOS Finex than have to take on the regulatory liability.
One of the things I learned while being at the B1 June event and getting to interact with a lot of Block.one employees is they can't really endorse third parties. Like, you'll never, like, they kind of, I wouldn't even call it an endorsement, but they obviously have scatter in their authenticator apps. It's like kind of like one of the, but I think that's a unique circumstance. I don't think we're going to see Block.one ever endorsing like a defuse or like well, let me just backtrack, and I love defuse, by the way, and so does EOS Name Service. But imagine if they would integrate Nudex onto their platform, and then Nudex does something wrong, or a vulnerability gets exploited, and then Block.one somewhat held responsible for the security risk of this third party that they kind of linked to on the website. So that's why I don't think that they're going to use a third party. I don't know what
that's a really interesting point. I mean, I wonder, I've sort of been hypothesizing also about where voice will go in the future for the EOS ecosystem. And they mentioned that, as part of the presentation, when you get a free EOS account, you'll then be able to obviously explore other EOS dapps and services. So I've been thinking maybe they'll have a dapp store built into the voice app, where then I could just switch, go to Nudex. It's very clear that it's not Block.one. They sort of remove their liability from it, but you could still use that separate service. So maybe it'll be something like that just very simple, put in a dapp store and with a disclaimer or something. But you're right in that they do seem very, cautious to take on any additional liability, which is smart. They have a very good legal team, but similar reasons to why they weren't live streaming. They said that live streaming the event was too much liability. I'm not sure for what reasons, maybe somebody running up on stage and saying something crazy. But that was pretty much the reason.
I mean, we're all just so used to this crypto world we've been living in for the last few years. Well, for me, the last few years, for you a lot longer. And we don't stop and think that this is a minimum of $4 billion company. Like when Brendan Bloomer came to our EE31 May event, he had bodyguards with him. Like one. I think there was one that dropped him off too out of the car.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
But and then they have a position available on their website for someone to lead their security detail. And I kind of joked a few weeks ago about them having like their own like secret service, but that's what big companies have. I forget how many millions of dollars per year Facebook spends protecting Zack. Like this is like a major company with a lot of liabilities and risks, and like,
absolutely,
kind of got to understand that situation. But speaking of liabilities and risks, I was
what a segue.
Yeah, so I was told to give you a MoreT token bribe right now. So
what?
So have you heard of the MoreT tokens? They've been kind of going
I think
viral.
I've seen it circling around, but what is it? What is a MoreT?
So a MoreT is the Dogecoin of EOS, and it was just launched less than 24 hours ago.
Okay.
And basically, you don't transact in MoreTs, you make bribes in MoreTs. So the token has no value, but it's rewarded for doing different tasks. So I was told that I would get paid 1 million Mortys, and I would allow you to pay you 9 million Mortys for us to talk about it. So we're going to talk about Mortys because we took a bribe of Mortys.
Oh, okay. I'll take a bribe. 9 million Mortys. That's pretty good.
And if while I'm transferring this on links, if you want to pull up those tweets under notes, I think everyone might enjoy those.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that seems like a lot of Mortys. Do you know what the total supply of this is?
The supply is 10 trillion, and there were
10 trillion.
But oh man, now our notes are up here, and everyone knows that this is going to be a real transaction. I've never sent you the Mortys for you doing that. You're only getting 8 million.
And my cat is on my desk moving stuff.
I'm only sending you 8 million now, Rob.
Oh, 8 million? You're gonna cut off 1 million just like that? Maybe we could give 1 million to the viewers or something.
Well, yeah. So if anyone's watching and they want Mortys, so Mortys are a thing. So I also want to give a shout out to TipItBot, which is a company called tipit.io. They were actually on my hackathon team with Peter Keay and Evan Schindler, the Tipit team, Mark Stairs. I'm sorry, I forget the other guys. I can't remember his other name. Anyway, really good guys. And they have this bot that it was originally a Discord bot, and now they have a Telegram version where you could basically tip each other EOS tokens within your Telegram channel. So I tested it out earlier. I tipped a few people in EOS tokens. And because we bribed them with Mortys, I paid them 100,000 Mortys this morning for them to integrate the Morty token immediately. And it's already in EOS Links. Fred from EOS Links was bribed last night to add it to Links Wallet immediately. Do you know how many projects have to wait a really long time to get these integrations going?
This is such a good segue from B1 being regulatorily cautious, and now we're talking about bribing people. So here's an interesting, somebody did a backflip, it looks like, for some Mortys. Here it goes. Oh, that looks sketchy. Okay. I didn't know if he was going to make that or not.
So that's Angel. He's working on some projects at Dappiness with us, and he actually took a couple hour train ride to B1 June because we told him how these bracelets would get him a ticket in, and he didn't have a invitation. He literally left his house Saturday morning and hopped on a train because he found that he had a B1 June invite, and now he's got those nice headphones we all got.
It looks like Crystal was bribed as well. 100,000 Mortys to retweet this. # no shame. That's pretty awesome. So you're going to send me these Mortys or what? My 8 million, my 9 million?
I just sent them. I'll
pull up Bribe.vr.
Yep. I just transferred you 8 million tokens. I will pull it up on the screen, and I didn't have time to come up with anything witty.
I'm really a bit sad.
But
I lost 1 million.
I don't know if you could read it. Can you read that? Up on the screen, you got 8 million.
Zack.vr to Rob.vr, 8 million Morty.
So the utility,
I appreciate it, sir.
The utility of a Morty token is to use them and not to hold them. That's why they gave you so much, Rob, because they know everybody. Okay. You got to spread your seed. You got to spread your Morty seed. You have to have people do stuff for you. So Angel, I told him to spam this link for us, and I was going to give him more Mortys. So it's just basically a fun unit of account, has no value, 10 trillion supply, and we're going to have the most memeiest supply distribution in the world ever is the plan for this. And in the Everything EOS channel, if you share a meme or a GIF that I like, because I'm the GIF and meme master, I will tip you in Morty tokens, and I have plenty of Morty tokens to tip. And as an offer to everyone listening to this podcast or watching it, if you leave a comment on, so I know it's a live chat right now, so probably we have no comments, but if you leave a comment with your account name, the amount of Mortys you want me to bribe you with, and a quick little snippet or a sentence about how you first heard about Everything EOS, I will tip everyone Mortys after this show.
Oh, that's a lot of bribes.
Within reason. I might not give you your full amount. You can't be too greedy. All right. So, and it just gets into value. So we're talking about the voice token. Like, what gives a token value is it's what the people who want it perceive it as. I mean, how you hold your value. I heard recently, I kind of knew this ahead of time, but at the Tulip conference, I bet a bunch of people are still there right now. Like, the Tulip concert had these Tulip tokens that were airdropped using VRAM from Liquid Apps.
Oh, that's cool.
Which I guess I'll do a quick plug there since I'm talking about it. The AirHuddle is still going on. If you haven't claimed your dapp tokens yet, go to blocks.io/DSP. And it should be pretty easy for you to make your claim there. I think that's where you go to stake them. I'm going to put a link in the description. There's a really good video. Someone shared it in the Liquid Apps channel the other day of how to claim. I'll post a few links, but basically everyone's got.
I had a question about that, by the way. So do I have to claim my HODL tokens, or can I just wait for 2 years and not do anything? And
okay. Good question. So if you don't claim immediately, let's say you haven't claimed yet, you don't get, there's no like punishment, I guess. Like you don't lose out on anything. As long as you claim before the end of the 2-year vesting period, you will get all of the airHODL tokens as if you claimed on the very first day. Now, what makes the airHODL model awesome, and shout out to Nathan Rempel for developing this contract, is you continue to accumulate vested dapp tokens over the course of 2 years. And we're already a couple months in, so everyone should have about 15 to 20, I don't know, 15% of your tokens should be vested. You could put those vested tokens to work immediately. So for web oracles, inter-blockchain communication oracles, randomness, VRAM, obviously, vAccount. So we have all these services that you could use immediately with your vested tokens. But what's cool about the airHODL is as soon as someone transfer those tokens out, they stop accumulating more vested tokens. So you get
okay, I see. So I was thinking that the claim was the transfer, but it's not. Okay, the claim.
So as far as the utility, you're free to use the utility as much as you want with your vested tokens. But once you transfer them out, let's say to like Nudex or something, then you stop accumulating new tokens. You're no longer part of the airHODL. But since you're still part of the original snapshot, and the contract was planning to give you tokens, and then you pull out of the airHODL, that just means everyone that remains in the airHODL gets more tokens.
Right. Okay. So yeah, my plan is just to stay in the whole 2 years and basically get as many as possible. So I'm going to do that. But I thought that claiming was like transferring, but now I see claiming as just what I have to do to get the tokens throughout that process.
No, but I highly recommend people, especially if you're a developer. So that's who the dapp token is meant for, is for the developers. It's a purely utility token. People ask like what they could do with it. Well, you stake it to any DSP. There's, I think, over 20 of them right now offering all these services I just mentioned. And you could use all of those services. You could put an oracle right inside your smart contract for like a price feed, for example. Or you can get randomness if you're a casino, all within your smart contract. So you don't have to run extra infrastructure to do that. But we'll move on. I didn't actually plan to talk that much. I'm glad you asked some questions about that.
And that was a genuine question. I really needed to know that. So that's good. Now I know to claim.
The next topic, though, has me excited. I'm going to share my screen here.
Yeah.
So Dan posted a tweet yesterday. So we learned about EOS VM at B1 June. It was part of the big announcement. So we got EOS VM and EOSIO 2. And he said, we just released a developer preview of EOS VM. I'd like to thank Bucky and the rest of the B1 team that worked on this. Now, a lot of people probably don't know who Bucky is. I only know him slightly just because he was part of the boot camp that Block.one did at Virginia Tech, and he gave one of the seminars during like the 6-hour boot camp that I watched. I watched like the recorded version of it after the fact, and Greg Lee introduced him, and he introduced him as a PhD. So he's got a PhD in computer science. So he's like top of the line.
Oh wow!
Straight out of Virginia Tech. So that's just showing like the type of talent that's coming out of Virginia Tech, but I guess people are wondering like, what kind of talent. I'll tell you why there's talent. So EOS VM, I'll just read the highlighted parts that I highlighted here. And they talk about EOS VM. We can get into it on another time if we want to dive deeper. While EOS VM was designed for blockchain, we believe it is ideally suited for any application looking to embed a high-performance WebAssembly engine. And then a few sentences later, it is our hope that one day, or I'll just read the whole paragraph. We considered the WebAssembly engines used by the largest browsers, but they all come with considerable overhead and assumptions, which are inappropriate for reusable libraries or to be embedded into a blockchain. So basically, I shouldn't have even skipped that part. That's the problem with going live here. So we just moved off Wabbit, right? And so what Block.one was doing before was they were using the most high performance, fastest, most efficient WebAssembly engines on the market today, but they're not deterministic. They're not meant to be deterministic. Regular web applications don't care to be deterministic. So they had to basically hack their way through these WebAssembly, these out-of-the-box WebAssembly engines. They had to hack them to make them more secure and make them work. And at the end of the day, it was their biggest security vulnerabilities was the web engine itself, because they just hacked something that wasn't meant for blockchain.
Right.
So they created this WebAssembly engine that they're claiming it to be not just the highest performance and best WebAssembly for blockchain, but for any use case. even regular web applications. And
That's
it is
pretty exciting. I mean, that shows the scope of what Block.one is doing as well. Like they're not just a blockchain company. At a high level, they're kind of a tech company or a software company building this WebAssembly engine. And it reminds me also of what we were talking about before B1 June, that maybe they would release a browser. And it would make sense. I mentioned earlier that I switched to Brave. And the reason why is because now Brave is built on Chromium. And Chromium is what powers Google Chrome as well. So now if you download Brave, it's as easy as clicking one button. It imported all of my saved passwords, all of my browser history, all my extensions, my bookmarks, everything into Brave. But now I have the benefit of using Brave and blocking ad trackers and all this stuff. So I could totally see Block.one doing a very similar thing where they launch a Chromium browser. You can import everything from Google Chrome or Brave in one click, and then take advantage of their new WebAssembly engine. So that's exciting.
Yeah, I highly recommend people actually read through the GitHub. So they didn't release any code yet. It's really just a README, and it's in plain English. You don't have to understand C++ to get this. So go on Dan's Twitter, click the GitHub link, and read the entire thing, because it's very interesting, and you could pull a lot of really good nuggets from that as far as what they're doing. They're setting it up to be modular, so it's really easy to integrate and plug in and out features as they're made or as you need for your particular application. But what makes this super, super exciting to me, and I said this publicly in a bunch of channels, so you may have already seen this. Dan, I'm reading a quote from Telegram. Someone asked, Dan, could your EOS VM version of WASM be easily drop-in integrated by the other users of WASM, like web browsers and other blockchains? And Dan's answer was yes, though it is dual licensed MIT for EOS IO chains and non-blockchain use. And then it's GPL3 for all other blockchains. Now, Rob, you want to explain what that means in plain English for everyone?
Yeah, the way I understand it is that means if you want to use the EOS VM for WebAssembly on another blockchain, like when Ethereum moves to 2.0, if they ever do, it's always 24 months away, it seems like. But assuming they make that transition over to WebAssembly, they can't use EOS VM. Is that right?
Yeah. So an MIT license is basically the license you use if you want to open source your code. It basically says, I'm releasing this for anyone to use. I hold no rights over it. It's free for everyone to use. So it's MIT licensed for EOS IO chains. So that includes mainnet, Talos, Warbly, everyone could use it, free to use, just like all other EOS IO code. It's also free to use for non-blockchain use. So let's say Chrome itself or Safari, if they wanted to use it, it's free for them to use. It's non-blockchain use. Anyone using WebAssembly, which is getting more and more popular by the day, if they want to use it for a non-blockchain purpose, free and open source to use. But if you're a non-EOS IO blockchain,
wow,
I'm afraid I've got some bad news. So
it's pretty amazing. I mean, they're flexing their power in the right way. Hey, you can use it for free as long as you're building on EOSIO. Maybe Ethereum 2.0 will be built on EOSIO. Wouldn't that be incredibly ironic?
They might be forced to, because we often see when projects move from one blockchain to EOSIO, or they just decide on EOSIO right out the gate. We usually see the typical blog article when it says, we did all our research and due diligence. We looked into all of the other blockchains, and after doing all of our research, we chose EOSIO. Right? That's the same thing that happens for any company or project looking to move to WebAssembly. In the README on the GitHub itself, they kind of explain they went from would they go from WAVM, Binarian to Wabbit. They were using all of these other tools that existed, trying to find the best one. They were doing their due diligence and research. And what they found was that none of them did what they needed, so they had to build their own. And not only did they build their own, they built what they believe is the best in the world, the one that everyone else is going to want to use outside of blockchain and inside blockchain.
It really is crazy if you think about it. When was the last time any blockchain you know of had a 6x performance improvement over their current iteration? It hasn't happened, but now that's what we're getting. We're getting 12x over the first version of EOSIO, but a 6x from what it is today. So it's pretty amazing. And just think, this is only year one. I mean, imagine what could happen year 2, 3, 4, 5 as this entire ecosystem matures. So it's really amazing. I'm glad we're on the EOS train.
Well, we often talk about this mass adoption, like how blockchain's still like very niche. People don't really understand it. But traditional software, they're using WebAssembly already, and they're going to see this WebAssembly engine built by this company called Block.one that they've never heard of, and it's called EOS VM. And that might be their first touch point with EOS or any blockchain for that matter. And that's going to be a great developer onboarding opportunity. Let's just say that. And you speculated a while ago about Block.one. Like we thought when we used to talk about what we thought Block.one was doing for B1 June, we looked at the trademarks that for MEOS at the time, and we kind of hypothesized that it might have been a browser, or that Block.one might have been working on a browser. So do you still have? Do you still think that's possible?
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of like what I just mentioned, where I think they could do it similar to the Chromium implementation that Brave has, where just in one click, you can import everything from Chrome or Brave into their browser. I think it
do you think they'd be branded like Block.one, like a branded browser? Maybe that is what MEOS is. So not probably not. I'm not even gonna go there. But I'd rather the current players implement it, because that would be a much bigger stamp of approval.
Right, absolutely. I mean, it would be cool if Chrome just implemented it and Brave just implemented it, and you could kind of piggyback off that. And I gotta bring up a quote. This is off camera what Dan said. Zack was saying to Dan at the end of our interview, "Oh, I'll stop speculating." And Dan said, as a very smart man, "I don't believe that for a second." And here we are speculating again.
I just want to state, speculating is fun. If you've ever followed a TV show, you follow Game of Thrones, in between episodes, you're speculating what's going to happen next. I'm pretty open about being a pro wrestling fan. I've been since I was like a child, with like Hulk Hogan and the Ultimate Warrior. Like that's all. Yeah. All wrestling is a big like drama. Like it's like a soap opera, but for grown men and children. And like you speculate on what's going to happen next, and because it's like scripted on the fly, it's like sometimes speculation leads to real things happening. And I actually have a great story about that. There's one thing we speculated on a while ago, a couple months ago, that because of the speculation, it brought the right kind of attention to it, and it revitalized something we've talked about before. And we're going to be going public about it in probably the next couple weeks.
Really? Can you tell me about it now? That's it? Wow. I don't even know what this is. This is crazy.
But it was all because we were talking about it and got the interest going again on it. And it was because of the speculation. So basically we speculated something was going to happen and it really wasn't. And because of the attention it got, now it is.
So you're saying we basically manifested whatever this thing is?
Yes. Manifest destiny, baby. That's what we did.
That's good. So
Michael Blue knows what I'm talking about.
Oh, he does. Absolutely. So Coinbase custody is live. We talked about that. EOS is now supported. Institutions can now store their EOS with Coinbase. Do you think that the Yubikey will play a part in that at all?
Oh yeah. So did you see that they released an example today of some new code using the Yubikeys?
No, I didn't.
So last July, I don't remember what release it was with EOSIO, but they released the original code that allowed like the use of Yubikeys or FIDO2 or whatever like the technology is called. But no one's ever integrated it. Like you can't really use your Yubikeys today with any of the major wallets. And I don't think it's gonna be real easy to use until 2.0. But in the meantime, while we wait, Block.one released their first version of WebAuthN. And it allows the use of Yubikey support within the browser itself. So they just released this new code. I'm kind of going off the fly here, but basically what WebAuthN is, it's a standardization for this secure way of basically running private keys through your browser interface. And it's I'm trying to think of another example of W3. So like they come up with like all the web standards for like what's acceptable, like JavaScript, what's acceptable, like the best practices. It's like a nonprofit organization, and they basically come up with all the best practices. I didn't realize my screen was still being shared. Whoops. But anyway, let me go back. Where am I? Is this the article? Yeah. So basically they came out with some boilerplate code. They said it's not ready yet. But if you want to just run it on a test net or on a private blockchain, it works, just so you could see an example. And there is one limitation to it, and it's right here. It says, most importantly, there is currently no way to display Ricardian contracts to users when using WebAuthN. For this reason, it should be used only on a private chain or an application you trust. So basically, that's the limitation it is today. But if you're a developer and you just want to try this out, you have this boilerplate code that you could modify however you want. And what that allows is, so Yubikeys have been like part of the EOSIO code for almost a year now. And then it was announced, the WebAuthN stuff, on Saturday, but most people don't know where to begin. It's like telling someone to build a house from scratch, but they've never like built a house before or have ever even read plans on how to build a house. But whenever they release this boilerplate code, it's like someone's giving you blueprints on how to build a house. And then you could look at those blueprints and you can make your own modifications. It's a lot easier to modify a house than it is to build a house from scratch, especially if you've never built a house before. So that's what's so cool about what EOSIO Labs is doing. Like, they've released the Authenticator app, which we've talked about extensively. It's basically the Block.one wallet, uses secure enclave. And I believe it's already deployed on the App Store, but not on the main.
Now actually got it approved. I don't recommend using it. Okay, hold on. Sorry, I'm getting a flash flood alert on my phone, and it's sending. Like,
I thought it was your fire alarm
in my ears. Did you hear that on your end?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no, my fire alarm was going off earlier today. Actually, they did a test and everything. But
so
anyway, I think there are two pieces of news that we want to cover still. Is that right?
Yeah, basically, I think there's more to the Yubikey. I said that on the last episode. They just released more code. There's also this cool. So remember how we talked about the roadmap, how they didn't mention it on stage, and then they did have a link that is basically the roadmap.
Right.
Remember that? So they recently made another page here. It's EOS.io/build-on EOSIO. And it's a pretty slick looking page. It just goes through all their technologies, their tools, basically all of the official Block.one SDKs that they've released, the Ricardian template toolkit, DMUX, EOSIO Labs, everything they've basically released recently, all this open source code. But then they have a big section for the EOSIO Yubikey. So they're going out of their way to say, hey, we're going to have these EOSIO branded Yubikeys, which Dan's clarified there's no difference to them. It's just they're branded, but they're the same as Yubikey 5 NFC. But the fact that they're making it such a big part of their branding and their communication tells me that they have big plans to use these Yubikeys as a major part of authentication for both mobile and desktop. And with WebAuthN, it's going to be making a lot of advancements, not just in blockchain, outside of blockchain, just web development in general. Everyone's got the same goal of a passwordless future. And keys are really easy to think of, especially for a non-crypto person, because you don't really have to explain to them the differences between their private key and public key. Maybe like you explain to them a physical key and what it does. This key can give you access to my house. And then for like multi-factor authentication, let's say you wanted to do something like transfer all of your funds, maybe you need two keys. So you plug one into your USB port, you plug the other one into your USB port, and that's a multi-sig essentially. So it's really easy for a non-blockchain person to understand physical keys. These keys basically have a unique identifier in them that they have to be local to your hardware that you're using. So you can't spoof it from somewhere else on the internet. Like I can't hack your computer unless your Yubikey is still in your computer and I hack it. Let's say I put a Trojan horse on your computer and I've been watching you and I know your scatter password too. With the current setup right now, if I had complete control over your computer and I was just observing for a while until you typed in all your passwords and I had a keylogger, I would know your scatter password and I could take all your money. But with the Yubikeys, even if I had your scatter password, but this feature would have to be baked into it, I could have your scatter password, I could have everything. But if a hardware key was part of the authentication process, if it wasn't in your computer, and even if it was in your computer, there's a physical component to where you have to touch it at the right time when it blinks, then people are out of luck. Funds are SAFU.
I think your analogy of, people can understand physical keys a lot more than digital keys. You could even imagine, and this is something Sonata Systems just said in chat, you can imagine if one was your owner key and one was your active key, okay, this one that says owner on it, I put away in my safe, I store it somewhere safe, and the active you put on your key ring and you take it around with you.
And just imagine,
sorry, go ahead.
How easy it would be to explain that to someone. Think of like your keys to your house, right? And just explain like, okay, this key can open and close your door, but you can't make copies of it. If you lose this key, you can't make another one from it. But then your like owner key or your like root key, this is what you would have to take to the hardware store if you wanted to like make a duplicate of your key. So you never want to lose this key. This one's got to be the safest thing in your life. And you have to use this one to create new like duplicate keys. This would be like a child key. And I don't know. I haven't thought this one through, but I'm going to think of really, really easy ways to explain things to people. I love the idea of hardware keys being more of a part of this, I think.
Absolutely. And there are two pieces of news I think we should cover before we should wrap. We're over an hour here now. But talking about a new investment. So EOS VC is a story that we've been covering since the very beginning, really, when it was first announced that Block.one would have this $1 billion dapp fund that they would distribute amongst a few different VCs around the world and have them invest in projects building on EOSIO. And now we had our latest investment from both Galaxy Digital and SVK Crypto out of London. On our interview that we had with SVK Crypto over on the Cypherglass channel, and we had one here on Everything EOS as well, they mentioned specifically that gaming was a big focus, and now they have just closed an investment in Azarus, which is a gaming company building on EOSIO. And if I understand correctly, they've done pilot tests in Rainbow Six. Is that right?
Yeah. So I'm just let me just pull up the article here.
Yeah. But
So
this is essentially what it allows you to do is it plugs directly into Twitch. It's very much for this streaming culture where in order to reward your users for watching your content, it sends little polls periodically. So it could say, hey, how many kills did Summit1G get in his last game? If you answer it correctly, you earn some tokens, and then you can use those tokens in the actual game. So pretty interesting.
So it's a plugin for Twitch. So anyone who pays attention to like esports and gaming, like they all stream on Twitch. It's a way that a lot of these professional gamers monetize what they do. And Azarus, one of the cool things we've talked about them before because there was like a built on EOSIO article about them a while ago, is that they're integrated with Twitch, but they were part of the Ubisoft Entrepreneurs Lab. And that's a big deal because we look at the companies that EOS VC is investing in and the people that they're investing in and where they came from in their experience. So we look at a company like Blankos. Their whole team is ex-Activision Blizzard guys. So one of the top gaming companies in the world coming to build on EOS with Blankos. And now we have Azarus, who's coming from Ubisoft, and they're working with Tom Clancy's Rainbow Six Siege. Their pilot was on one of the most mainstream games. And then they gave some results also. It says results indicated that in limited rounds of select creators, Azarus-enabled streams saw a comparable increase in viewership and engagement metrics, as well as an increase in the frequency of gameplay by players. So basically, with their incentivization model, players played more frequently, and their audience rewarded them more frequently and with more value because of the Azarus tool they built in. So that's really cool. Is it's going to open up this world of incentivization and monetization that didn't exist before, and now it does. And now that they got this extra funding, they're really going to be ramping that up. And we could probably spend a whole episode talking about what that means, but there's a clear emphasis on gaming. And you mentioned your conversation with SVK Crypto, and I think Brendan or Brock said that EOS VC's half of their funding has been into gaming companies.
Yeah, pretty crazy. I mean, it really shows that that's where they're focused. That's a huge portion of where they think it's going to, the industry is going to take hold first.
So that's where we're heading. EOS VM. It's not just for blockchain anymore, kiddies. It's for everyone. If you're building code on WebAssembly and you want the most highest performance engine, EOS VM is going to be there for you. And then we have like mainstream gaming companies. They're going to be integrating like Twitch, and the companies themselves are going to be integrating with this. But I have one more project I wanted to talk about before we sign off, and that's WordProof. We've talked about WordProof before. It's timestamping on WordPress, and it's being created. It's already built by a team of WordPress experts. They've been in the WordPress plugin industry for over 10 years with plugins with over 1 million active users. And now they're available. And this is on WordPress.org in the plugin section of the site. They're available for anyone to use. And you don't even have to know about blockchain. They offer free Talos wallets for users who sign up through there, or they have an onboarding process for regular EOS wallets, but we all know there's a cost associated with that currently. But what's also cool about that is within the plugin, if I had it up on our screen right now, they actually have a way for them, the developers, the WordPress developers who find out about this plugin, there's a page dedicated to our EOSIO developer series. So it teaches these non-blockchain developers who just want to timestamp their articles, they might not want to go in any deeper. It gives them this easy onboarding process, this link. And on that link, we don't even require them to vote for anyone, because that's another point of friction. We removed the friction. They put in their email address. We send them the free EOSIO developer courses. We potentially just onboarded another developer. And since we haven't talked about it in a while, and shout out to EOS Writer and everything, and us obviously, but EOS Writer is already using the word proofing tool. So if you go on eoswriter.io, all of their articles are timestamped. So you know with certainty of when it was published. But we're going to see a lot more of this. And the other thing that he mentioned was June 22nd is coming up really soon. There's a major WordPress conference in Europe called WordCamp, and it's on June 22nd. And Sebastian, the CEO of WordProof, he's going to be speaking at the biggest WordPress conference in the world to over 2,500 developers, explaining what WordProof is, how to use it, and just telling them why it's important. So if they go home and do that, one of the first things that they're going to see is, what's this EOSIO? I want to learn more about it. We're going to onboard them into the EOSIO developer series, and then we might have ourselves some new developers.
That's awesome. And one more thing I want to do. I noticed some people in the chat, they're already typing numbers. They could see me looking in the Blancos drawer. We haven't given away a Blanco in a couple episodes. We're going to give away another multi-Blanco exclusive from South by Southwest. I will mail this to you anywhere in the world. Pick a number. First, Zach, send me a number 1 to 100.
It's not going to be 37, anyone. It's not going to be 37 because I gave up my secrets. That's always my number.
All right. Zach has sent me the number. I can see it on my screen. Type in the chat a number 1 to 100 to win the multi-Blanco. We'll call out whoever gets it first on our screen. Let's see the numbers. We got 157 watching. Let's see how long it takes to get some people typing. Here they come. Oh, and we got a winner. Looks like Sonata Systems, actually, and this is the second time Sonata Systems has won. Last time he had me send it to Crypto Fees, so I sent the Blanco to Crypto Fees. But congratulations, Sonata Systems, number 99. You win the multi-Blanco.
You never sent me my Blancos, Rob, by the way. I never asked you. I never followed up on it, so it's probably my fault. But Rudy gave me a package of Blancos at B1 June. So
nice.
Thank you, Rudy.
Hey, I got him for you.
I know you got him. I just the game's not available. I know I can get him eventually, so it's all good.
Absolutely. Yeah, it should be later this year.
So just a reminder, if anyone wants Morty tokens, you got to leave that comment. Give me your account name, how many Mortys you want, and I will give them to you. And also just leave us a little blurb about what you thought about the video or how you found everything EOS. But I think that's it for today. I have a cool video coming out next week. I have someone flying into Pittsburgh actually this weekend to record an in-person podcast. I met him last Saturday and he offered to do it. And I was like, sure, we could do it. Why not?
That's exciting.
I'm not going to.
So should we, it's only us two today. It should be easier to do this outro. You ready? You ready to start it off?
Yep. All right, guys. We'll see you next week. I'm Zack Gall.
I'm Rob Finch. And this is Everything
EOS.
Go EOS! Leave a Go EOS in the chat. Smash the thumbs up. See you guys next time.